Hello, you wonderful people. This is Jomo Rising, making a nice recording on a beautiful day. I was inspired by another video I saw on YouTube, so I thought I would come on and list the top 10 mistakes I've made as a dungeon master, game master, keeper of arcane knowledge, storyteller, what have you. So many different names and they're all dumb. Anyways, I figured I'd come on and talk about the top 10 worst things I've done as the guy in charge of the game, and also maybe the best 4 things I've done since being in charge, since taking the mantle. Alright, a little background is that I've been playing with largely the same bunch of people now for how long? Started in 2012? Started in 2012 and it's 2025 now, so that's 13 years with the same bunch of morons, and it's a good group, and we've played an awful lot of D&D, mainly D&D, and to be specific, mainly D&D First Edition, and to be more specific, mainly D&D First Edition Homebrew, because pretty much to play any role-playing game is to play a homebrew, because you're going to find stuff in any published set of rules that you don't like. The fact that I have almost rewritten the core rule books just because I found them to be atrociously written, and perhaps it's just a changing of the times, because when those books were written in the late 70s, early 80s, they didn't have the same technology for writing that we have today. To be completely fair, that when you had a whole chapter written and printed out and typed out, you were perhaps less likely to omit it for not being perfectly written. So it just makes you look at what's written today and say, why haven't you learned how to write? Anyway, I'm being negative and punitive, and a lot of the content that goes into role-playing games from companies deserves to be criticized harshly. So, fair enough. But I'm getting off point. Perhaps I don't want to talk about the crap part of my tenure as being in charge. This will be mostly relating to D&D because that's mostly what I've played. I have also played with this same group of maggots. We've played Call of Cthulhu. We've played a little bit of Vampire the Masquerade. That is to say, some players chose not to play that. And so we've played in different versions of D&D, but mostly First Edition Homebrew, which is by far the best. And I will just go ahead and say that, because it's true. Alright, number 1, and this was fixed around 2016, I think, for me. For the first couple years of running campaign, I was insecure in my world building. So instead of, and I gotta say, I like running a sandbox type game, meaning if the players decide to up and do something, they can do it. They don't need me to guide them to the adventure. They will find it on their own. The adventure is out there, they just have to find it. Or want to look for it. Or inspire me to make specific content if they decide to go that far. Anyway, in those first couple of years I ran campaign, I arbitrarily put a boundary around the kingdom that the characters lived in. So it was a jungle world, and all the plants in the world were evil. And so the only place where civilization thrived was in this one kingdom, where the rest of the world was just taken over by evil plants. And so to venture into the jungle was great for adventure, and because there was always going to be a fight out there. However, it seriously limited exploration and a player's desire to have their character visit different parts of the world, to have there be new and interesting places to visit. Yeah, that was an early problem of mine, and it quickly fixed by making my world. And I didn't do every village. I didn't give rules for every people group around the world. I very simply detailed larger settlements and larger civilizations, and had a map, to be specific. I did have a world map at that time. But even that, I purposely kept vague to kind of inspire exploration. Anyways, that's number one. And that's pretty understandable. Number two is a problem I've had forever. I've always had this problem. I still have this problem. It is not a huge problem, but it is a problem. I've written books. I've written, a book, and I've written, a lot of content. And description is still a problem of mine. Describing a scene, and especially leading up to a high-tension situation, an important fight, a deadly fight, a dangerous situation, and I'm not giving the room or the scene or the attackers or the threat a proper description. And this might be partly due to the fact that in combats I use miniatures, and sometimes I feel that the miniatures kind of steal the need for total description. But I have I have heard complaints and frustration from my players because they're in this dire situation. Their characters are in this dire situation, and I'm not fully describing the scene for them, and I can understand why that's frustrating. I get, as the dungeon master, I get excited about the situation and kind of skip certain things, and that's it's an area of growth for me. And to be honest, playing Vampire the Masquerade has slowed down my process, because I don't see that as a miniatures based game, and so I have to describe scenes more, and so I'm learning. It's an improvement I'm making. Alright, number 3. I have been told that I make rule changes arbitrarily. That something will come up in game and I will think it's stupid and will change it on the spot. And I have been told, although I don't recognize the evidence for this yet, I have been told that some of these changes have come on top of other changes that I made. Perhaps I'm not being clear. Say the long sword, or no, say a great hammer does 1d8 against small to medium creatures and 1d12 to large creatures, and that's damage. Say one day, for whatever reason, I don't like that, and usually I do have a good reason for this, because I've increased my education on what a warhammer is, or what have you, or a great hammer, what a maul is, and so forth. I'm a budding medievalist, so I don't think it's unreasonable to, well, not make everything realistic, because that's, this is a fantasy game, but to not let things be stupid either. But say I said one day it's 1d8/1d12 damage, and then come back a couple of years later, because remember, this campaign has been going on for 13 years, off and on. Well, not even off and on. A couple months off doesn't count as off and on. Why do I do this? But say I change the great hammer weapon damage to 2d6 3 to 18, and the players will probably like this, because surely their new character has a great hammer. Or perhaps they won't like it when the legion of ogres are assailing them, and they all have great hammers that do more damage than what they wrote down for their great hammer. And that I can certainly see how that would cause trouble. And I haven't been completely receptive when people call me out for arbitrarily changing rules that I had already changed and didn't document. But so that's something I am conscious that I sometimes do, because rules as written in any edition are not perfect, and they all need to be tweaked for a situation. They all need an exception. So there's that. Number 4. This was a big one. There is no waffling around this one. I made I think 3 different new character classes for D&D, and all of them are broken. This is not to say that other character classes that were published are not broken. In fact, these character classes that I put into my game came out of officially licensed products. I tweaked them a little bit to fit my world, but they are character classes that came out of officially licensed product, generally speaking, with charts and specific information. It's from the books. And I made these classes because I like seeing these classes used in other campaigns and other settings and other media. I like the idea of them, and it hasn't been great. And when a player said that my archer class, I have a class where you can shoot an arrow as your standard mode of attack and do more damage and hit easier as an archer when you use your bow. I think I took it from a Dragon magazine or Dungeon magazine, probably a Dragon magazine, and I think the class as written is thoroughly broken, and yet I put that in my game, and I didn't make adequate changes to make the class not broken. I have since removed that class and the other classes that I've made because, first of all, I don't see them as necessary anymore, and second of all, they didn't add much. They gave me the chance to add to the game where it didn't need it to be added to. But I feel that's a big one because it's all completely on me. It's not like, well, my friend is playing an archer wrong, and so it's actually on him, or anything like that. This is all on me. I put it into the game. Players picked up on it, and it's not been good. And so they're pouring effort and time into doing something that is broken, and I'm bothered about that. Number 5 is adding treasure from published modules to my world when my world is not balanced for it, or not where the magic item presented in the module that I'm using is unbalanced for my world. That my world isn't completely full of magic. My world doesn't have a store in every town where you can buy magic items. and I don't often run modules. I occasionally will sneak in a module into my world and respect it to my world. And that works pretty well, except these few times where I will run into magic items that are just inappropriate for my world. I ran Return to White Plume Mountain, and I very much appreciated the adventure. It has weapons in it that are very powerful, and my players' characters came upon those weapons, got excited about them, and are using these great weapons that break my world a little bit. So that is on me, again, because I put these modules in without vetting them for my world, as I should have. I have to be more careful. And the way I responded to it wasn't great either. That one of my players had this really cool weapon, and I pretty much told him that he has to lose. We need to remove that weapon. We need to lose that weapon somehow. And he didn't appreciate that. Imagine that. He didn't appreciate having his toy taken away from him. Yeah. So it was my mistake for ever having it in there, and that retconning should never have happened, and that it should never have been allowed to happen. And that's on me. Number 6, and this is something I used to do a lot more back in the day, way back when. I've always been opposed to fudging dice. Like, if a monster is about to kill a character, I will let the die stand, pretty much. Back in the day, it was. Even then, I would let the dice kill characters, because that happens sometimes. It has to be a reality in the game that the characters can die. And I am cheating if I am fudging dice. I am lying to my friends if I fudge dice. And yet, back in the day, I would fudge dice. I would, when a player is behaving in a way that I don't like, for whatever reason, he had a bad day, he been rolling bad and he's frustrated or whatever. If I was having a negative reaction to something one of my players would do, I would fudge dice against them. That player would become a target for my anger. That I would change dice to punish that character, that player. This is it's not something I do anymore. It's not something I'm tempted to do at all anymore. But it was certainly something I had done. Instead of just, talking to the person if they are actually having a bad day or what have you. Because my players aren't perfect. Guess what? My players aren't perfect. But I don't fudge dice for them anymore. I don't fudge dice. The first time I ever saw something like this, where the DM is responding like a child to another child. Player was giving back talk to the DM over something the DM said, and the DM had a poisonous insect appear and bite that character for damage, and just because he was angry about what the player was doing, and that was the first time I saw it. That wasn't in my game. It's curious that for a while there I was being punitive in my game. Number 7 is very different from the others. I had been running D&D for several years with the same players, and decided that I needed a break to rejuvenate my D&D thinking, my planning, my world building, my looking to the future, and filling in all the gaps and all the work that goes into running a world in a sandbox situation. I was burned out. So what I decided to do was run Call of Cthulhu for about 4 months is what I'd planned. I would run Horror on the Orient Express, which is an amazing adventure, not a sandbox adventure, but an amazing adventure, literally a railroad game. And I ran that in the interim for a break from D&D. And Call of Cthulhu is a very different game from D&D, and I didn't prepare myself for that difference. For running running a game where description is much more important, where scenes are more important, and I brought a lot of D&D into Call of Cthulhu, and I didn't feel good about that. Plus, my players were new to Call of Cthulhu, pretty much, and were looking for sandbox alternatives to actually following through the game as intended. I took this amazing adventure and kind of ruined it. And now I can't run it again for those players because they know the whole story. So yeah, I'm disappointed about that. That I didn't make the adjustment between game systems. And that was, well, that makes the list in my mind, because it was 4 months that didn't need to happen. And in the end, it did nothing to rejuvenate me to run D&D again. So I struggled through without having a proper break. And until we did actually take break again, because we normally take break at Christmas time, and that was fine. I regret running Horror on the Orient Express as a break, as a stopgap. Yeah, that's something more I've noticed than my players noticed. But still, I used to run Call of Cthulhu all the time back in the 90s. It was a skill I'd forgotten, doing so many years of D&D. When you're playing, and understand this too, when I'm playing D&D, we're playing probably 45 Saturdays a year. 45 Saturdays a year. You ever sit back and actually count the days you play? And perhaps you understand my commitment and my players' commitment to the game. Number 8. It's a bit of a sensitive topic. Something I did a long time ago again, and I'm more sensitive to now. I'm much more sensitive to stuff now than I was back then. But I had this young woman player in my game. I still do. And I kept having her character encounter marriage proposals. So that because she was the woman in the game at that time, it was her character that got marriage proposals when they came to a new town or something. And so there is always a romantic effort put on her character compared to the other characters run by male players. And she told me, and it shocked me that I did it, but I became more sensitive to people who actually don't want more of a romantic thing in their game, that's not what they're in D&D for, which I completely understand. This player called me out for that, and for putting her character in those situations because the player was female and the character was female. Yeah, well, that wasn't great. Number 9, and this is more of a player issue that I noticed, and I'm not sure how many other people notice this or think it's a bad thing, but I've come to regard it as a bad thing. And I have some incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly involved and committed players, and they know the books, and they know the changes I've made, generally speaking. So when a newer player comes into my game, these grognard players, these very, very learned players, are right there to help the new player, to open the book to the right page, to show the new player where they need to go, what they need to be looking at. And I've decided that's a bad thing. That right now I have several players in my game who don't open books, who don't read anything about their characters, who don't know their 2-hit and damage numbers offhand. They have had this stuff regularly fed to them, and that my very, very nice, very learned players want to help these other players. And now these new players don't look at books, and they've been trained to accept help instead of pursuing it themselves. And this is something that's happened over time. It's something I've noticed over years of playing together. But there is a point where you need to let people find their own information, and to not have another player tell them about their character's stuff. Especially with spells, it's most noticeable that a new player might go down the list and say, "Ooh, this fireball thing sounds cool," and then another player will tell them all about the fireball. I mean, you want to save time. You're in the middle of a battle or something. You want to save time, so you just tell them, or you show them the pages. Ideally, new players are doing this by themselves. They are researching things, going to their own books, and figuring things out. It has been a process to wean new players off getting constant help. And it's been a thing also to call out my players for helping too much, for being there with the book, with the information, and not letting that player grow into somebody who is as learned as themselves. And finally, at number 10, I have been nicer to some of my players and then to others. And that seems like an easy problem, or understandable problem, but I have some of my players are not the nicest people. They are not always kind. They are good people. They are kind people. But if somebody gets on my nerves, then I might be harder against them. Not so much in the game anymore. Like I said, I've weaned myself off that stuff. But I have been nicer to some players who are never aggressive at the table. And that's not proper either. The worst instance of this is when my girlfriend's character had been taken below 0 hit points. And in my game, your character is dead at hit points minus con. So you are bleeding out until you hit your constitution number, your constitution attribute score. So if you have a 12 constitution, then your character is still alive at -11. I let my girlfriend's character survive at -12 in this example. And yeah, I shouldn't have. She had reached negative con. She should be dead. But I let her survive at -12 because I guess I was being nicer to her than I have been to other people who didn't survive at -12. She's my girlfriend. I want to be extra nice to her, and I should be extra nice to her. But I shouldn't break rules for her. So that's them. That is the 10 big things that stick out in my mind over the last 13 years of playing with this same group of people. Now, things that I did right. The number one most important thing I did right was to boot bad players. There was a time where I had like 7, how many players did I have? Up to 10? I had a lot of players. This is back in like 2017. I may have had like 10 players. 4 of them were brand new, and they were all longtime players together. They were all friends of each other, and yeah, I took them all on, and while it was a lot of work, it could have worked, except that 3 of these players were incorrigible. They were awful. They did things, primary sins as a player, in my mind. As a very committed player, I found these not tolerable. For example, one of these players would kind of, in the middle of a scene, in the middle of a fight, in the middle of a discussion, would go out and walk their dog for an hour. I mean, it has to be done, I understand that, but you're not playing if you're out walking your dog. In this time that everybody is set aside to play the game, you're checking out and not playing. I found that that was not tolerable. But the deal breaker that made me kick these players out was that my more established players were saying that they were going to quit if the game kept going the way it was. And there were severe personality problems at the table, and there was a refusal to cooperate, a refusal to let things be when a hard decision didn't need to be made. And so the game would stop while arguing would happen for hours during in-game time. And my more established players, some of them rightfully said that if the game goes on like this, then they're not going to play anymore. And I decided to side with my more established players than to side with a clearly disruptive influence. And so, yeah, that was it. Those 3 players were out. We did gain a player. Like I said, there was 4 players originally. We did gain a player who turned out to be an excellent player, and that was great. Yeah, that was one of the good things I did, was pretty much stand up for my players by not allowing a disruptive influence. Number 2, I refused to give up DM authority. The DM has the ultimate authority at the table. The books do not. The desires of the players does not. The DM is the authority, ultimate authority, and the ultimate responsibility lies with the DM. That said, and I've maintained that when players have given the often heard rebuttal, but the book says this. I know what's going on in the game. I know my players very well. I know the game very well. I know the game I want to run very well. And DM authority is crucial to that. Similar to that is number 3. Well, perhaps you might be thinking that I'm some sort of authoritarian player or dungeon master. But listening to my players and not being autocratic, well, is a very important thing that I've instituted. That as part of who I am is, especially later. In the early years, I was rougher, but I am much more able to truly listen to my players when they have a disagreement with a ruling or a different interpretation of a system. That happens a lot, where we are literally on different pages when it comes to a particular thing. But people banter around the word benevolent dictator, and perhaps that's what I am as a dungeon master. but you have to be benevolent. You have to listen. And the fourth good thing I've done as a dungeon master is not letting the books be autocratic. While I have all the authority, that means that the books don't. That the books are very often fouled. They're very often bad, even, especially by modern standards. That some things written in the 70s don't quite do so well in 2025, and things that really haven't been fixed, at least not appropriately. Some of the creators in the original D&D had a more limited scope of what they call fantasy. A fantasy human doesn't necessarily need to be anything like what we know as a human. And so saying that a female character can never have the same strength as a male character is to deny a certain amount of fantasy. Or to say that a certain race is limited in what class they can be because of some racist content or concept of what a particular race is capable of, then yeah, that is curtailing fantasy. That I'm not saying that certain things aren't real in the real world, but I'm not talking about the real world. I'm talking about my fantasy world. And the original producers of the game could have been a bit more sensitive to the fantasy side of things than to their understanding of reality. But the books themselves are a mess, and there is a lot that's wrong with them, and yet they're the best. Number 4 on my chart is don't let the books, no matter what book they are, run your game. The biggest example of this is that during a segment of contention during my game, when authority was being questioned, and this was before I was firmly in the camp of that the DM has all the authority. A player stated that if the DM hasn't made a ruling on something, then we will go by what the book says. And that sounds reasonable, but I did not allow that, because that would mean that there wouldn't be a chance for me to have authority in the moment. That means that if something hadn't been decided, that we would go by what the books say. Well, perhaps in that moment I would have a ruling, and I would. That going by what the books say is interesting to me now. It is not rule. It's not the rule of law anymore. That is in my mind. And because I know my players, and because I know my game, and because I know myself better than I've known myself most of my life, but in the last 8 years or so, I've come to know myself a lot more than I ever have, and that really helps. But all of these understandings have progressed to make a better game for everybody. And I'm not saying it's fun all the time, and I'm not saying it's a grind all the time, and it's not bad. The game isn't bad. The game is good. People are enjoying it. I've had the same players for 13 years. People that could very easily be doing anything else on their Saturdays. But they've committed to my game, and I've committed to making my game better. And so should you. Well, thanks for listening. This is Jomo Rising, signing off.